Yum, yum!
Okay, part 2 of this procedural midsole mesh fusion buck shape. Our pipeline envelope is going to be the main primary of our fusion, and we have to make a few adjustments to it before we can use it as a primary. Since it was made from these curves, the edges and boundaries here are essentially collinear, I guess, in front view, and there's some gaps here because the resolution isn't quite high enough to match this curve shape. And so this isn't going to work when we try to trim this shape with these curves. So let's make a few adjustments. So with this selected, I'm going to add an edge slide, and I'm also going to add a selection operator, which is going to be the boundary edges, like so. I'm also going to set the edge slide to use the edges. And now if I just pull this back, you can see that it just pushes our boundaries just so that the curve is going to intersect it, but it doesn't change the shape of our midsole at all. So we're just going to give ourselves some extra space like so. Okay. I can also see that my last is intersecting the buck even before the point of the added extension that we added. So I want to make some adjustments there. I'm going to grab the curve particle generator for starters. Actually, you know what? Let's investigate this from the source. So that's part of the byte line offset, and we rebuilt that curve. And I actually redid this. I redid this file because I had a crash in the middle of my recording, and so I had to build it up from scratch. So I believe we had this at 35. So this is where it would have left off, but it's still intersecting, right? It still doesn't look good. So I might just jack this up to 45. And that looks a little bit better. But let's also go into our curve particle generators, and you want to select both of them because they need to have matching point counts. And I'm going to bump this up to like 45 as well. And that just gives us the extra resolution we need so that we don't have an intersection there. Now, you can use these pieces in your fusion directly, but as I mentioned before, I like to keep my starter pieces just separate from everything. I don't want them to be procedural, and I don't want them to be directly involved in my fusions. That's just a personal preference. You do what you want. So with our byte line envelope, I'm going to make a new mesh item layer, and this is going to be the byte line trim. And all I'm going to do is merge the original byte line curve into here. Okay, and then I'm going to make a new mesh item layer, and I'm going to call this last trim. And let's just merge the last into there as well. And good enough. I'm not going to do the outsole line, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but let's start building this up. So I'll select the byte line envelope, and I like to start in auto select mode. I'm going to hit new fusion. I can hold Alt to bring up this menu if I want to name my fusion, which I do. So I'm going to call this midsole buck, and then new fusion with selected meshes. Click away and you can see the fusion. I'm going to turn off my wireframe here, and you can see that I've lost my edge weight again. And that's no biggie. I'll select the fusion item, and way at the bottom here, you can turn on edge weighting, and I'm going to turn on accurate edge weighting. There we go. Okay, so let's turn off this outsole and byte line, and we have the last trim here. We have the byte line trim here. So let's trim the byte line first. So I'm going to turn over to select source mode. So I'll select this, hold shift, and you can see when I click on my fusion, it's actually going to select the primary source. And I'll trim this as well. And nothing's happening. So let's check out the byte line trim curve, and we're going to make a few adjustments. We're going to turn on manual extrusion depth, and I'm going to just set a higher number here to ensure that that curve goes all the way through. Now you can see it's cutting all the way through, and we have our strip items as well. Okay, so for the bottom here, I'm just going to temporarily use my outsole line as a trim. So I'll select this, and then trim, and then let's grab the outsole line, turn on manual extrusion depth, and set this to the same amount. And look what's happened. We've trimmed in the wrong direction. And normally when something like this happens, my MODO instinct is to flip the curve. So if I flip it, nothing happens. So the way to actually get this to work is actually you need a curve that kind of, if I go to a front view here, kind of starts down here and then comes back down. So it's more like hugging at the side it needs to cut. That's what you would need to do. And I don't really like having to do that. And I think this is something that's going to be fixed in the future. So let's with this mesh selected, let's clear its roll like so. And we already built a perfect cutter for this before when we made the outsole plane, this guy here. So with this mesh selected in source mode, select source mode, I'm going to go back and select the primary again, and I'll trim. And there we go. And then finally, let's turn on our merged lass. I'll grab that, grab the primary again, and trim that as well. Great, so now we've got that all built. We can make some last little adjustments here. I'll go into edit attribute mode, select one of the strip items. Override default is not turned on by default, so I'll turn that on. I'll drop my strip profile all the way down, so it's a chamfer. And then if I select one of the channels here, I can just drag in the viewport, and you can see I get a nice little preview of my little chamfer shape. So there you go.
Yum, yum!